I'm Dr. Shweta Bavari from Pharmacy Institute, Noida Institute of Engineering and Technology, Greater Noida. In this lecture, I'll be covering the topic Pathophysiology of Epilepsy and Neurodegenerative Diseases. Pathophysiology of epilepsy will begin with this. Epilepsy is a disorder of the cerebral cortex characterized by recurrent seizures. A seizure is a sudden surge in electrical activity in the brain that causes an alteration in sensation, behavior or consciousness. So basically we are talking about epilepsy, which is a disorder in which there are occurrence of seizures, and the occurrence, when we talk about recurrent seizures, this can be in advanced cases, the recurrence can be frequently on daily basis, but in generally these occurs in a month or two. The frequency can be like this also. So the two major variants of epilepsy are partial seizures and generalized seizures. When we talk about partial seizures, that means their origin is basically focal, that the origin of the seizures is from one particular part of a brain. There is a particular focus, so they begin focally in a cortical site. When we talk about the generalized seizures, the occurrence or their beginning is from both the hemispheres. That is what, because they have been given the name generalized. They generally occur, they involve both the hemispheres for the seizures. Then when we talk about partial seizures, they can be classified as simple partial, complex partial, partial with secondarily generalized tonic-clonic seizures. So simple partial seizures are the basic characteristic of simple partial seizures is the preservation of consciousness. There is no loss of consciousness in simple partial seizures, and the manifestations depend, and what type of symptoms will occur. This depends upon the part of the brain involved. For example, if a particular part of the brain is involved in the right hemisphere, which controls the movement of the arms, so in that condition the numbness of the arm of the left hand will occur. So the symptoms that occur basically they depend upon the part of the brain which is involved. Complex partial seizures, these are associated with impaired consciousness lasting for 30 seconds to 2 minutes. Means the person who have complex partial seizures in this form of epilepsy, the person loses consciousness for a period of say 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And in complex partial seizures, there occurs purposeless movements such as lip smacking. There is a twitching in the lips. There can be twitching in the lips, that is involuntary, this uncontrolled twitching of the lips, and hand wringing. This type of movements occur. The involuntary movement of the hands occur. Then partial with secondarily generalized tonic-clonic seizures, in which in the partial with secondarily generalized tonic-clonic seizures, the simple or the complex type of partial seizures, they eventually evolve into tonic-clonic type of generalized tonic-clonic type of seizures. When I use the term tonic, it means I am talking about the sustained muscle contractions. Now, and when we talk about clonic, I am talking about continuous and very spontaneous muscle contraction and relaxation, very rapid and continuous muscle contraction and relaxation. So when I talk about generalized tonic-clonic seizures, in this what occurs? First of all, muscle contraction, sustained muscle contraction is followed by the rapid muscle contraction and relaxation for about 2 to 3 minutes. So there is tonic seizure, then there is clonic seizure. So these periods, these episodes keep alternating. So when the clonic, the rapid muscle contraction and relaxation, the clonic seizures occur, it results in jerking movements in the body. And when the tonic seizures occur, it results in stiffening of the body, because there is sustained contraction of the muscles. It results in stiffening of the person's body. Moving ahead to the generalized seizures. Generalized seizures can be classified as absence seizures, myoclonic seizures and tonic-clonic seizures. So absence seizures, now as the name suggests, absence seizures in which occurs abrupt onset of impaired consciousness associated with staring and cessation of ongoing activities typically lasting less than 30 seconds. This means that, for example, the person who has absent seizures, what happens? A person is talking to a group of people, and suddenly there is the episode of absent seizures. The person will lose the consciousness about whereabouts about what is happening around him or her, and will abruptly stop talking and will stare in one direction. That is what absent seizures are. The person becomes absolutely absent-minded for a fraction of seconds. Then myoclonic seizures, these are associated with brief, for a second, with brief shock-like contractions of the muscles, which may be restricted to a part of one extremity or may be generalized. So this basically what happens in myoclonic seizures, there are shock-like contractions, there are jerking movements again, there are shock-like contractions of the muscles of the body, and the entire body may be involved. These shock-like contractions can occur in the entire body, or it can occur only in one part of the body. Say these contractions can occur in one limb only or in legs only. This occurs. Then tonic-clonic seizures, as I told for in the partial seizures also, tonic-clonic seizures are associated with loss of consciousness first of all. Then there is sustained contraction, the tonic phase, followed by a phase of clonic seizures, which is rapid contraction and relaxation resulting in jerking movements in the body, which lasts for the period of 2 to 3 minutes. Sorry, 1 to 2 minutes. Moving ahead, neurons. Now, when we talk about what results in, what is the basis for this disease epilepsy, what causes epilepsy? So, neurons basically discharge electrical current. We know that the action potential runs through the neurons, we know that. So, we can say that neurons discharge electrical current, and they also discharge neurotransmitters, because from the action terminals of the neurons are released neurotransmitters, excitatory like glutamate, they can be inhibitory like gamma aminobutyric acid. So, the neurons discharge electrical current and neurotransmitters at the synapse to permit communication with the interconnected neurons. This is how the neurons communicate with each other, by discharging electrical current, the action potential that moves from one neuron to another, and through neurotransmitters that are released into the synapse. So, generally a normal neuron discharges repetitively at low baseline frequencies. This when we talk about a normal neuronal discharge, it is at low baseline frequencies generally. But when these low baseline frequency discharges are replaced by the bursts of high frequency discharges, and also not a small number of neurons are involved. When a large group of neurons start to discharge at the burst of high frequency discharges in a synchronous manner all together, a large population of neurons are doing the same, then it results in epileptic seizures. This is the one region. Then there is another region for the occurrence of epilepsy or these epileptic seizure, that is excessive excitatory neuronal transmitter and reduced inhibitory neuronal transmitter. As I just said that there are neurotransmitters like glutamate which are excitatory in nature, and there are neurotransmitters like gamma aminobutyric acid, GABA, which are inhibitory in nature. They have inhibitory actions. So, if the discharge, when the neurons release neurotransmitters like GABA in excess amounts, and the discharges, the inhibitory neurotransmitters are discharged in less amounts. So, there is a imbalance between the excitatory and the inhibitory. This can further result in epilepsy. Then we talk about the pathophysiology of neurodegenerative disorders. What are neurodegenerative disorders? Focusing on the term neuro means neurons, degeneration means their degradation or their destruction. So, neurodegenerative disorders or neurodegenerative diseases are age-associated progressive deterioration of the neuronal structures and functions, ultimately leading to cognitive disability and dementia. When I talk about cognition, I am talking about when I talk about cognitive disability, I am talking about impairment of the thought process, the inability to judge, inability to take decisions, inability to memorize things, inability to remember things. So that is cognitive disability, to perceive things, to gain knowledge, have a thought process. This is cognition. So when there is a disability in this process, it is a cognitive disability. Dementia is again a term which is given to a chronic cognitive disability. When this chronic cognitive disability, when there is impairment, this impairment of thought, this inability to remember things, the inability to judge things, perceive things, when this becomes chronic, it results in dementia. It is a state when these small things, this thought, this perception, it starts to hinder the daily activities. Like a person forgets how one can eat food, how can one button his shirt. So these type of day-to-day activities are affected, that is known as dementia. So cognitive disability and dementia are the two hallmarks of majority of the neurodegenerative diseases. The neurodegenerative diseases that we will be focusing in this lecture are Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. These are the most prevalent of all. Beginning with the pathophysiology of Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease is a progressive neurodegenerative disorder that occurs due to the degeneration of dopaminergic neurons basically in the substantia nigra pars compacta. And if we do in very simple terms, we can just say Parkinson's disease is a progressive neurodegenerative disorder which occurs due to the progressive degeneration or progressive destruction of the dopaminergic neurons. So as the aging process occurs, more number of dopaminergic neurons are degraded. So more dopamine levels decline, and therefore it results in Parkinson's disease. The symptoms of Parkinson's disease include tremor at rest, the shaking of the limbs. These are tremors. These are at the resting stage also. If I want to stand with my hands like this is a resting state. If I say, then they will be shaking. This is involuntary. These are tremors. Usually starting in the hands. Of course, these tremors start in the hands, then they also move to legs and the other parts of the body. Then the second symptom of Parkinson's disease is muscle rigidity. The stiffening of the muscle starts. The stiffening of the muscle starts in a manner that there is inhibition in the movement of the limbs also. There is so much muscle rigidity that the person is even unable to walk or is unable to move the hand, for example, for lifting something, for driving. These type of activities are also inhibited. Then paucity and slowness of the movement. Paucity means absolute deprivation. There is no movement at all. The person is unable to move. The term for this paucity of movement is akinesia. Akinesia is there is no movement at all. The person cannot move at all. Then when there is slowness of movement, when a person starts moving very slowly, this is bradykinesia. The term uses brady. Okay, bradykinesia, that is slowness of the movement, reduced movement. Then there is also another symptom of Parkinson's disease is postural instability. Postural instability resulting in flexed posture. A typical symptom in the advanced stage of Parkinson's disease, you will see in the people who are afflicted with Parkinson's disease, there is a flexed posture like this. They walk in this manner. They are not straight. This is the flexed posture, often appearing as the disease progresses. So the body bends forward basically. That's a flexed posture. Non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease include fatigue, sleep disorders, and cognitive and psychiatric disturbances. There is cognitive impairment. I told you that the hallmark for neurodegenerative disorders are cognitive impairment and dementia. So this occurs generally occurs in most of the neurodegenerative disorders. Then Parkinson's disease, when we talk about the pathophysiology of Parkinson's disease, how it occurs, Parkinson's disease occurs as a result of degeneration of dopaminergic neurons, mainly in substantia nigra pars compacta. The substantia nigra pars compacta, this is a region in a brain where a group of large densely packed dopaminergic neurons are present. it has been named substantia nigra pars compacta. So the dopaminergic neurons present here, they are destructed, their degeneration occurs with age. The loss of dopamine in the pars compacta increases the overall excitatory drive in the basal ganglia, disrupting voluntary motor control. So when there is loss of dopamine, this ultimately, because there is loss of dopaminergic neurons, so there is loss of dopamine as well, which is stored in these neurons. So when there is loss of dopamine, it disrupts the voluntary motor control. So when the voluntary motor control is lost, so what happens, the symptoms like muscular rigidity occur, then there is bradykinesia, these occur, then there is postural abnormality, because the voluntary motor control, because we have a control over our body. If I am standing straight, this is voluntarily. If I want to bend, this is voluntary. But when this motor control, when this voluntary control over these motor functions is lost, it results in what? Postural abnormality in the people who are afflicted with Parkinson's disease. It results in bradykinesia, which I told is the slowness of the movement. The people walk very slowly, they perform any activity very slowly. Then there is muscular rigidity, there are tremors, in the limbs and the body. So this occurs due to loss of dopaminergic neurons. And the hallmark of Parkinson's disease is synucleinopathy. We use the term synucleinopathy. What happens? Basically, there is an association of mutations in alpha synuclein protein has been found to be a dominant feature in Parkinson's disease. There are mutations in the gene that code for alpha synuclein protein. When there are mutations in the genes that code for alpha synuclein protein, it results in abnormal type of the production of abnormal alpha synuclein protein, which results in abnormal misfolding of these proteins. So when these alpha synuclein proteins misfold, they start to aggregate and they form Lewy bodies. What are these Lewy bodies? These are basically aggregates of these abnormal misfolded alpha synuclein protein. Then these Lewy bodies basically deposit in the dopaminergic neurons in the substantia nigra pars compacta, where they result in the degeneration of these dopaminergic neurons and hence result in the occurrence of the Parkinsonian symptoms: bradykinesia, tremors, postural abnormality, these kind of symptoms basically. Moving ahead to the pathophysiology of Alzheimer's disease. Now, Alzheimer's disease, this is another neurodegenerative disorder. So, in Alzheimer's disease is a progressive neurodegenerative disorder that results in cognitive impairment. The hallmark for Alzheimer's disease is basically cognitive impairment. I told you what cognitive impairment is. Cognitive impairment is impairment of thinking, remembering, judging, taking decisions. So, and understanding things, perceiving things. This is cognitive impairment, and this is the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. And it is a progressive neurodegenerative disorder because the neurodegeneration, the degeneration of the neurons it progresses with age. As the aging increase, the number of neurons or the degeneration of the neurons increases with that. And the neurons that are concerned in the Alzheimer's disease are basically cholinergic neurons. Their degeneration occurs, which ultimately results in cognitive impairment. When I say cholinergic neurons, I am talking about the neurons that release acetylcholine, okay, as a neurotransmitter basically. Symptoms of Alzheimer's disease include gradual decrease in the cognitive function, which includes a decline in memory, learning capacity and also thinking capacity of the afflicted individuals. Other symptoms of Alzheimer's disease include perplexity. When I use the term perplexity, it means confusion. There is improper judgment in the people, inability to perform routine tasks like to button the shirt, to tie the shoelace, because the person cannot remember, cannot judge how to do this. So there is inability to perform these routine tasks. There is irritation, there is withdrawal from the family members and the close ones. How this now when we talk about the pathophysiology of Alzheimer's disease, how this Alzheimer's disease basically occur, what leads to the destruction of cholinergic neurons. So Alzheimer's disease basically occurs as a result of deposition of the extracellular amyloid plaques of the beta amyloid protein and intraneuronal neurofibrillary tangles of tau proteins, which are basically the depositions of misfolded proteins. Now I'll explain this in very simple terms. When we talk about the abnormal protein deposition in the Alzheimer's disease, like we talked about synucleinopathy in Parkinson's disease, deposition of the Lewy bodies, here also two types of proteins are involved. One is beta amyloid protein, the second is the tau protein. Now the abnormal misfolding and aggregation of beta amyloid protein results in the formation of amyloid plaques, and these plaques, these depositions, these aggregates of the beta amyloid protein are present where? Extracellularly. So these plaques form extracellularly, the depositions are extracellular in nature. Now when we talk about the second protein, which is tau protein, so the abnormal misfolding and deposition of this tau protein results in the formation of what? The abnormal misfolding and then deposition, its aggregation results in the formation of the neurofibrillary tangles. Neurofibrillary tangles deposit where? Inside the neurons. So amyloid plaques are outside, they have extracellular deposition, and neurofibrillary tangles have intracellular deposition. Okay, and they are made up of what? Tau protein and beta amyloid protein. Two type of proteins are involved in the pathogenesis of Alzheimer's disease, and the hallmarks are amyloid plaques extracellularly and neurofibrillary tangles inside the neurons. So these are the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. So when this happens, when these amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles are depositing, these protein aggregates lead to the degeneration of basically cholinergic neurons in the hippocampus and the frontal cortex. So when the degeneration of the cholinergic neurons occurs, this again ultimately when these cholinergic neurons are degenerated, destructed in the hippocampus and the frontal cortex, this results in the occurrence of the characteristic symptoms with the cognitive deficit and the loss of short-term memory. Now when we use the term short-term memory, I would like to notify here, short-term memory is if a person, for example, has just taken his meal, has just ate his food. The person as soon as he rises from the dining table, moves out, he'll forget whether he had the food or not. If a person was going to take a shower, as soon as he reaches the bathroom, he doesn't know what is he there for. He forgets what was the purpose of the person going there. So this is the short-term memory I am talking about. So basically Alzheimer's disease, the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease are the deposition of the amyloid plaques extracellularly, deposition of the neurofibrillary tangles inside the neurons, and these deposition basically occurs in the cholinergic neurons, and they result in their destruction, and the destruction of the cholinergic neurons ultimately results in the hallmark symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, which is impairment of cognition and loss of short-term memory. So when we talk about both of these neurodegenerative disorders, here we were able to see that cognitive impairment was a common feature in both in the Parkinson's disease also and Alzheimer's disease also. And and the major hallmarks, that the key note to take from this, that Parkinson's disease is basically a synucleinopathy in which the deposition of the Lewy body occurs. This is how it is different from the Alzheimer's disease. So this is the keynote that we need to remember to differentiate between the pathophysiology of Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. Also in Parkinson's disease, there is degeneration of the dopaminergic neurons, and in Alzheimer's disease there is majorly the degeneration of the cholinergic neurons. So these are the two neurodegenerative disorders that we had to cover for this lecture session. That is all. Thank you.